I don't hate night shifts. In fact, there was a time when I liked them. The nights were quieter, fewer people, less pretending. You finished your work, got paid, and went home while the world slept. That Christmas, I worked the night shift because I had no other choice. My wife had just lost her job in November. My son was only 3. Our savings were almost gone. Every hour of overtime meant a meal, an electricity bill, a few days of postponing my worries. The warehouse where I worked was on the outskirts of Minneapolis, right next to the highway. On the night of December 24th, most people asked to leave early. I stayed until the very end. When I switched off the warehouse lights and pulled down the metal door, the clock on my truck showed 11:31. It was so cold outside my lungs ached from breathing. Snow had been falling since early afternoon, thick, heavy, and relentless. The streetlights were dimmed, as if the whole city was trying to disappear. I just wanted to go home. The road to my house wasn't a highway. It was a long side road, running through sparse woods and a few old residential areas. It was deserted during the day, and almost completely empty at night in the winter. I turned on the heater, drove slowly, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I didn't turn on the music. I needed to stay awake. About 10 minutes later, as I rounded a long bend, I saw a car stopped at the side of the road. The hazard lights were on. The car was covered in snow, as if it had been there for quite some time. There was no tow truck, no one was outside, only a figure in the driver's seat, head bowed. I slowed down. Familiar scenarios began running through my head. Maybe the car broke down, maybe the person was drunk, maybe they were just resting. I looked at my watch. 11:44. I thought of my wife waiting at home, trying to stay awake so I could get back before midnight. I thought of my son sleeping on the sofa, hugging his teddy bear with torn ears. I thought of stopping the car in the middle of a snowy night, in a place with no phone signal. And I drove past. Just a few hundred meters later, that feeling came over me. Not guilt, not anxiety, but the feeling of having missed a crucial step in a process. Like when you close a door without remembering if you locked it. I looked in the rearview mirror. The car was still there, but the hazard lights were off. I frowned. Maybe the person had started the engine. Maybe they didn't need help anymore. I continued driving. 3 minutes later, I looked in the mirror again. The car was closer. Not much, but enough for me to notice. I didn't see it overtake me. I didn't hear the engine. It was just there, closer than before. My phone vibrated, not the typical call notification, but a very soft vibration, as if someone had just lightly touched the table. The screen lit up. A text message. "Why didn't you stop?" I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded lightly on the snow, my heart pounding. I looked around. No other cars, no one standing by the roadside. The message was from an unsaved number. I typed, "Who is this?" It wouldn't send. I looked up at the road. The other car was gone. I continued driving, faster. The snow was falling thicker, as if someone were turning up the sky. The headlights only illuminated a few meters ahead. As I entered a bend in the road, I saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded. I swerved to the left, narrowly avoiding him. Through the window, I could clearly see his face. It was the same man from the car earlier. He didn't look at me. He looked toward the back seat of my car. I didn't stop, not because I was brave, but because I didn't know what else to do. After avoiding the man standing in the middle of the road, I continued driving, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles ached. I didn't look in the rearview mirror for the first few minutes. I was afraid that if I did, I would see something I couldn't deny anymore. But then I did. In the mirror, the road behind me was empty. No cars, no people, only thick snow, ripped apart by the headlights into white streaks. I let out a shaky breath. Just tension, just exhaustion, just Christmas, making everything feel strange. I repeated those words in my head like a clumsy prayer. About 5 minutes later, I started to feel cold. Not the kind of cold from the weather. The heater was still on, the warm air still blowing, but there was a very specific chill at the back of my neck, as if someone had opened the window without my knowledge. I glanced quickly toward the back seat. No one. Empty seat. No bag. No coat. No sign that anyone had ever sat there. But when I turned back to look at the road, I noticed something that made my stomach churn. My breath was starting to condense on the rear window. Not the front, but the back. I lowered the heater, thinking it might be due to a temperature difference. But that didn't explain why the thin layer of condensation on the rear window was only in one specific area, right in the middle, at head height. I reached up and wiped the glass. The condensation melted under my fingertips. And in that brief moment, I saw a faint mark, like a handprint that had been there for a long time. I don't remember if I yelled or not. I only remember speeding up. The road started to look wrong. I'd driven this route hundreds of times. I knew every bend, every sign, every old gas station on the edge of the small town in front of my house. But that night, the familiar things weren't there. The bend that should have been there wasn't. The speed limit sign was gone. The gas station had no lights. I looked at the clock on the dashboard. 12:04 a.m. I was sure I'd been driving for at least 20 minutes since leaving the depot. I should be almost home by now. I opened the map app on my phone. No signal. The phone vibrated again. The screen lit up. A new message. "You've taken the wrong road," I yelled. This time I was sure. "Get out of here," I yelled into the air. "I'm not stopping, understand?" I didn't know who I was talking to. The next message appeared almost immediately. He stopped. He just hadn't realized it yet. Right then, my car stalled. The engine sputtered, the dashboard lights flickered, and then went out. The steering wheel felt heavy in my hands. The car slowed down and came to a complete stop in the middle of the road. Silence descended. I sat still, not daring to move. My breathing was rapid, creating thick clouds of mist in front of me. In the rearview mirror, the fog on the back window was thicker, more pronounced. I heard something. Not a voice, not a knock, but the sound of fabric rubbing against the seat, very light, very close. As if someone was adjusting their seating position. I squeezed my eyes shut. I didn't want to look. "You can turn back," a voice said. Not from the phone. Not from the car's speakers, but from right behind me, a deep, weary voice, like someone who had been waiting a long time in the cold. "Just turn back." I opened my eyes. In the rearview mirror, I couldn't see a face. I only saw a blurry shape, like a shadow reflected through glass, obscured by fog and snow. I shook my head repeatedly. "No," I whispered, "I can't." "You could," the voice replied. "You just didn't." My car started again. Suddenly, without warning, the lights came on. The engine roared. I didn't hesitate. I stepped on the gas and drove straight ahead, no longer caring where I was going. The familiar road finally appeared. Signs, streetlights. The houses were scattered on the edge of town. When I turned onto my street, the clock showed 12:26. Everything seemed normal. My wife was standing at the door when I parked. My son was asleep in her arms. "Where did you go?" she asked. "I've been calling you." I looked at her for a long time, as if checking if she was real. "I got lost," I said. That night, I didn't tell her anything more. The next morning, I went to the car to shovel snow. The back seat was soaking wet. Not from a gap in the window, not from snow falling in, but from a streak of melted snow, a very distinct shape like the mark of someone who had sat there for a long time. On the inside of the windshield, a faint inscription appeared as I breathed on the glass. "Next time, will you stop? I no longer drive at night. Not because I'm afraid of accidents. Not because my wife asks me to, but because every time I drive past a car stopped on the side of the road, every time I see the emergency lights flashing in the winter night, I get this feeling that, if I don't stop, that thing will get in my car again. And next time, it might not be in the back." I didn't move to that town to start over. I moved because I wanted to disappear. Not the kind of disappearance you see in movies, no name change, no running from the law. Just a very real disappearance, leaving a place where everyone knows who you used to be, how you used to live, how you used to fail. After the divorce, I realized there are places where there's no longer a place for you, even if you're still standing there. This town is in the Midwest, more than an hour's drive from the nearest city. Small, flat, quiet. Less than 10,000 people. Nothing special except for the long winters and the habit of not engaging in conversation with others. I bought the house because it was cheap, and because it was on the edge of town, where no one would accidentally pass by. An old, single-story wooden house with a low roof and an attic. The previous owner said the attic was just for storage, never used for living. He said it a little quickly, but I didn't mind. At the time, all I cared about was that there was no one else in the house besides me. I was wrong. Autumn passed quietly. I went to work, came home, cooked for one person, and went to bed early. No friends, no guests, no one knocking. That's what I wanted, or at least I thought so. By early December, the town began to change. Christmas lights were hung up. The grocery store played holiday music all day. People asked each other about their holiday plans, then quickly stopped when they realized I had nothing to share. I didn't decorate the house right away. I left the Christmas tree bare in the corner of the living room for a few days, without turning on the lights. I told myself I'd do it later, but the truth was, I wasn't sure if I wanted the house to look like a place waiting for someone. It wasn't until the 23rd that I hung up the lights, a cheap string of lights, a soft yellow light. The house looked different. Not warmer, just less empty. The night of December 24th arrived without snow. The air was damp and heavy. The sky was so low I felt I could touch it if I were standing in the attic. I finished work around 7 o'clock in the evening. Before leaving the office, a small incident occurred, an incident I would think about many times afterward. As I put on my coat and prepared to leave, a colleague I had barely spoken to turned to me and asked, "You're going home to Pine Road, aren't you?" I paused. "Yes," I said. "How did you know?" He shrugged. "I heard it from other people. It's very dark there." There was no ill intent in his voice, just a casual remark. But what bothered me was, I had never told anyone where I lived. I drove home in silence. The road to my house was darker than usual. A street lamp had been out since last week, and no one had fixed it. The only light came from my porch, casting a glow on the wet street. As I inserted the key into the lock, I noticed it turned too easily. There was no familiar click. The door wasn't locked. I stood still for a few seconds, my hand on the doorknob, trying to remember the morning. I remembered locking it. I was sure. I always locked the door. It wasn't a random habit, it was the only thing in my life. I did exactly the same thing every day. I pushed the door open. Nothing unusual. No strange smells. No furniture disturbed. The fireplace was off. The living room was quiet. The small Christmas tree still stood in the corner, its lights flickering slowly. I told myself I was imagining things. But when I closed the door, I realized the latch was in the open position, as if someone had unlocked it from the inside and then carefully left. I locked the door again. This time, I turned the key very slowly. I could clearly hear the metal clicking. I cooked pasta. I turned on the TV for sound, news, weather, an unusually warm winter. I turned off the TV because I couldn't stand the voices. When I returned to the living room, I saw the package. It was under the pine tree. Not large, neatly wrapped in dark green paper, the folds perfectly straight, as if the wrapper had done it very slowly, very carefully. I knew one thing for sure. It wasn't there this morning. I stood looking at it for a long time, not afraid, just the feeling of being noticed. I checked the doors, the windows, the back door. They were all locked. I bent down and picked up the package. It was warm, not the warmth of the room, but the warmth of something that had been held close to a person's body for a long enough time. I swallowed hard. Inside was a Christmas sweater. Gaudy, flashy, absolutely not my style. But it fit me eerily perfectly. Shoulders, arms, chest, as if someone had measured me by eye. On the inside of the collar was a dark stain, dry, hard, blood. And then I smelled it, the smell of a person. Very close, very fresh, as if someone hadn't left the house yet. From the ceiling, there was a very faint sound. Not footsteps, but the sound of shifting weight. I stood still, realizing something that sent a chill down my spine. If anyone was in the house, they would have been here before I arrived. I didn't go upstairs right away, not because I was brave, but because I was trying to postpone the moment of having to confirm what my mind already knew. I stood in the middle of the living room for a long time, clutching the blood-stained sweater, my ears straining for any other sound. Nothing. The fireplace crackled. The Christmas lights twinkled steadily. The wall clock showed 8:17 p.m. I put the sweater down on the table, turned back to lock the front door again, even though it was locked. I tried to open it, it wouldn't budge. I did the same with the back door, then the bedroom door. They were all locked. A feeling of stupidity began to creep in. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe someone got the wrong house. Maybe I forgot to lock the door. Those thoughts didn't calm me down, they only tired me out. I decided not to go upstairs. Not yet. I sat down on the sofa, turned the TV back on, and turned the volume up higher than necessary. An old Christmas movie was playing, the kind where all the conflict is resolved in 90 minutes. I wasn't watching. My eyes drifted toward the ceiling. Around 9 o'clock, I heard a noise again. Not clear, not sudden, just a very subtle change in the air, like when you realize someone has entered a room before you've seen them. I stood up. The house was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. I called out, my voice hoarse. "Is anyone there?" There was no answer. But I had a very clear feeling that I hadn't asked the right question. I grabbed a kitchen knife and stood at the bottom of the stairs leading to the attic. The dim light cast distorted shadows on the low wooden ceiling. "Just a storage attic," I muttered. There's nothing there. I took a step up. The floor creaked. I stood still, waited. Nothing happened. I took another step. When I reached the attic door, I realized it wasn't completely closed. There was a small gap, enough for light to filter through. I pushed the door open. The attic was empty. No boxes, no suitcases, no chairs. Just a dusty, low-ceilinged space with the smell of old wood and dampness. I breathed a sigh of relief. But then I looked down at the floor. There were barefoot footprints. Not one, not two. A whole chain of footprints, clearly visible through the thin layer of dust. They led from the furthest corner of the attic, around the wooden beams, and stopped right above the stairs, in a position where, if you stood there, you could look straight down into the living room. I imagined it all too easily. Someone standing up here, in the darkness, watching me open the gift. I stepped back too quickly and slipped. I nearly fell down the stairs. I slammed the attic door shut and locked it, though I don't remember ever locking it before. I sat down on the living room floor, my back against the wall. The clock showed 9:42. Time was starting to feel strange. I sat there for a long time, or at least I thought it was a long time. When I looked at the clock again, it was only 9:44. The TV was still on, but the scene seemed to repeat. I was sure I'd seen this before. I changed channels. They were all Christmas shows. I turned off the TV. In the silence, I heard breathing. Not loud, not hurried. Just a steady breathing, like that of someone resting. It wasn't coming from upstairs. It was coming from my bedroom. I got up and walked toward the hallway. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. I was sure I'd closed it. I lingered in front of the door for a long time. Then I pushed it open. The bedroom was empty, but the blankets on the bed were askew, as if someone had just sat up. The pillows were indented. When I put my hand on them, they were warm. I don't remember how I stepped back. I locked the bedroom door from the outside, then pulled a chair to block it. I went back to the living room, sat near the doorway, the knife on my lap. The clock showed 10:11, then 10:11, and then still 10:11. I wasn't asleep. I didn't dare. Each time I closed my eyes, I had the feeling that if I opened them, I would see someone standing a little closer. It wasn't until the pale gray light of morning began to filter through the window that I realized I'd spent the night. The clock showed 6:03. I got up, my legs numb. The living room looked normal. No gift package, no shirt, no knife on the table. I realized it had been put back in the kitchen. On the dining table, there was a folded piece of paper. The handwriting was slow and neat. "Thank you for letting me stay Christmas Eve. I moved out of that town a week later. I sold the house so quickly I accepted a loss. I didn't tell anyone the real reason. I just said I changed plans. I thought that leaving would end everything. I was wrong. The first year after that, I lived in an apartment in another state. On the night of December 24th, I found a small gift package on my door. I thought it was a mistake. The second year, I moved again. The gift package was still there. The third year, I didn't go home for Christmas Eve. I stayed in a hotel. When I returned the next day, the gift package was waiting for me in the living room. The wrapping paper was different each year. The ribbon was different, but the size was always the same. I never opened it. Now, whenever I rent or buy a new place, I do one thing first. I stand in the living room, turn off all the lights, and listen. Not to hear if anyone else is there, but to make sure that I'm not the only one listening. I was the only one in my family who didn't drink alcohol on Christmas Eve. Not because I hated alcohol, but because I was always the one driving. It was an unspoken agreement from years ago, when my father started to decline, and my mother no longer trusted me to drive at night. I was the eldest son. That responsibility fell to me naturally, as if there had never been another choice. That Christmas, I was 32 years old. I lived about 40 minutes drive from my parents' house, in the suburbs of Pennsylvania. It was cold, but there wasn't much snow yet. The forecast said heavy snow would fall after midnight. I arrived at my parents' house around 6 o'clock in the evening. It was a small family gathering, like every year. Not crowded, just my parents, my sister and her husband, and a few close relatives. Christmas lights hung all over the porch. A large Christmas tree sat in the middle of the living room. Everything looked warm, familiar, safe. At least on the surface. As soon as I walked in, my father patted me on the shoulder and said, "You're just in time. You drive tonight?" I nodded. Yes. No one asked if I wanted to. Everyone started drinking. Wine, whiskey, beer. Laughter grew louder with each passing hour. I drank soda and coffee, sitting at the end of the table, listening more than speaking. Around 8 o'clock, it started snowing. At first, it was just a light drizzle, but by 9, it was falling more heavily. The wind picked up, blowing snow against the windows. I glanced at my phone, checking the weather. Snowstorm warning after 11 p.m. I told everyone that. No one paid attention. Around 10 o'clock, my uncle, the one who drank the most, stood up and declared that he was fine, that he could drive home himself. I objected. So did my mother. But he just laughed, put on his coat, and went out the door. I stood up instinctively. "Let me drive you home, Uncle," I said. My uncle waved his hand. "No need. You have to drive the whole family." I looked at my father. My father looked away. That was the first moment I could have done things differently. But I didn't. My uncle left at 10:17. 10 minutes later, my sister started complaining that it was too cold and she wanted to go home early. Her husband was drunk and couldn't drive. My mother looked at me, that familiar look, the look of someone who was used to relying on me. "Can you drive them home first?" she asked. I looked at my watch, at the snow outside the window, at the dark road leading to the highway. "Okay," I said. I drove my sister and her husband home first. The journey took almost 25 minutes because the snow was starting to blanket the road. It was almost 11 o'clock when I got back to my parents' house. The party was nearly over. It was just my parents and me. My father had another drink. "Stay a little longer," he said. "Wait until the snow stops." I checked my phone. 11:02. I thought of my uncle. I thought of the road he had taken, the same road I was about to drive. "I can get home," I said. "Be careful." My mother said nothing. She just looked at me for a long time. I left my parents' house at 11:09. The snow was so thick that the headlights only illuminated a few meters. The road was slippery. There weren't many other cars. The small town gradually disappeared behind me. About 10 minutes later, I saw a car stop on the side of the road. The hazard lights were on. My heart sank. I knew whose car it was even before I saw the license plate. I slowed down as I approached the car. The hazard lights flickered in the snow, the pale orange light torn apart by the wind. The car was parked close to the curb, its nose slightly tilted down into a snowdrift. No one was outside. No sign of other vehicles. I switched on my hazard lights and stopped a few meters behind. I knew it was my uncle's car. I also knew I shouldn't waste any more time confirming it, but I still got out. The cold wind lashed against my face, cutting into my lungs like a knife. I had to pull my collar up higher, hunching over to shield myself from the wind. Snow had covered the road, obscuring all traces. I called out, "Uncle?" There was no answer. I approached the driver's side door. It wasn't locked. I gently pulled it open. My uncle sat there, his head slumped forward, his hands resting on the steering wheel. No blood, no major collision, no burnt smell. There was only a profound silence. I touched my uncle's shoulder. Cold. Not the kind of cold, someone who'd just been outside, but the kind of cold that had been there for a long time. I took a step back, my heart pounding. I looked around, as if hoping someone else would appear and say I was mistaken. No one. I called 911. The call connected intermittently. The operator's voice was torn apart by the wind and interference. "We'll send a team," she said. "Stay in your car. Don't leave the scene." I went back to my car, slammed the door shut, and turned on the heater. My hands were shaking so much it took me a few seconds to get the key into the ignition. I looked over at my uncle's car. The emergency lights were still flashing. A steady rhythm, not hurried, not slow, as if it had never had a reason to stop. I sat there for almost 20 minutes, or maybe longer. Time in a blizzard doesn't pass normally. I glanced at my watch several times, but the numbers were useless. All I knew was, the wind was stronger, the snow was thicker, and the world around me was shrinking to just two cars stranded in the middle of the road. Then I heard a very faint sound. Not from outside, but from the back seat of my car. I froze. I had checked the back seat before leaving my parents' house. No one was there. No one could be there. The sound repeated, like fabric brushing against a mattress. Very slow, very hesitant. I didn't turn around immediately. I didn't dare. I called, I said loudly, my voice sounding strange in the enclosed space. "Rescue is coming." There was no answer. But I felt the weight, not with my eyes, but my car sank down very slightly in the back. I swallowed hard, slowly looking in the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty, but the thin layer of fog on the inside of the window was thickening, not on the front windshield, but on the rear window, at head height for someone sitting there. "You're back," a voice said. My uncle's voice, not coming from the car outside, Not from the phone, but from inside my car. I squeezed my eyes shut. "You're back," the voice repeated, low and hoarse, as if it were difficult to utter. "Good." I shook my head repeatedly. "I'm sorry," I said, not knowing who I was speaking to. "I should have stopped sooner." "It's all right," the voice replied. "You're here now." I heard the sound of a seatbelt being fastened. Very softly, very clearly. I opened my eyes. In the rearview mirror, I couldn't see a face, no clear figure. I only saw a dark area, darker than the shadows, as if the light from the interior lights was avoiding a specific seat. "You're cold," the voice whispered. "Shall I give you a ride home?" I trembled so much, my teeth chattered. "I can't," I said. I don't have." The voice was silent for a moment. Then it spoke, very slowly. "I've been driving all night for someone else. Now it's your turn." The ambulance lights appeared in the mirror, dim and distant. I had never been so relieved to see those lights. As soon as the red and blue lights reflected on the glass, the weight behind me vanished. The breath on the rear window dissipated. The cold sensation on the back of my neck receded. I spun around. The back seat was empty, as if no one had ever been there. The police and ambulance arrived faster than I expected. They checked my uncle and shook their heads. One of the paramedics put his hand on my shoulder and said it was a heart attack. Quick, not very painful. Perhaps my uncle didn't even realize what was happening. I nodded. I didn't talk about what I'd heard. I didn't talk about the back seat. No one asked. The funeral took place a few days later, just before the new year. The snowstorm had passed. It was cold, but quiet. The family stood around, talking of my uncle as a cheerful, slightly impulsive, but kind man. No one mentioned that I could have stopped the car earlier. No one blamed me. But I did. I was still the family driver. I still didn't drink. I still drove everyone home safely every holiday. But from that year onward, I had another rule. If I saw a car stopped by the side of the road on a winter night, I always stopped. Even if it was late, even if it was cold, even if I was scared. Because I knew, if I didn't stop, someone might get into the back seat of my car. And the next time, it might not wait until I got home.